but something happens to them. And not long after, they become very courageous. They are willing to take whatever the Jewish religious authorities or the Roman authorities throw at them. And in fact, many of them, testifying to the truth of the resurrection, become martyrs. Well, how do we explain it? They explain it by saying they've seen the resurrected Christ. Joe, it's not easy to take somebody from being a coward to become a person who's willing to lay down his life. Something happened to the apostles. I think the idea that, somebody saw a vision or had a dream, they say that this transformation was wrought within them because of the resurrection of Christ.
So how would you answer someone who says, well, they just did that because they wanted to give validity to the story, but when it came to the time of their death, they probably would have backed off from that somewhat, or I mean, how do you respond to people dying for...
It seems to me this, Joe, the apostles, if the apostles had invented the resurrection story, then they knew that it was false. Why wouldn't that story, why wouldn't that conspiracy break apart? Conspiracies break apart quickly and easily. They never said that they had invented something. And in fact, many of them went to their death testifying to this. And this is different than, Buddhists killing themselves to protest the Vietnam War, or people dying to protest things. If the disciples died for the resurrection, they knew it was a lie. And they died for a lie. I think that's a fundamental difference.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's the third line of evidence.
Number 4, the conversion of Saul of Tarsus to the Apostle Paul. I mean, there may be no greater conversion in the history of humanity. Saul is a Hebrew. He is adamantly opposed to this new Christian sect. He believes that it has brought disgrace upon Judaism. He believes that it is a heresy. He initiates persecution of the Christian group, has them thrown into jail, even affirms the stoning of Stephen there in the book of Acts. Yet he says that he has an experience with the resurrected Christ. And this changes him.
This is an educated man, by the way.
This is a very educated scholar of the Torah. This is a person who, had he not converted to Christianity, probably would have went down as one of the greatest rabbis of the period. In the category of some of the most distinguished rabbis. And Joe, he then becomes Christianity's greatest theologian. Christianity's greatest apologist and missionary, single-handedly almost takes the Christian message throughout the Mediterranean world. Something happened to him. He's not a weak-minded individual. This is an incredible transformation. This is an incredible conversion experience. He says it's because he encountered the resurrected Christ.
All right. Compelling testimony there. Okay, so that's the fourth one.
Number 5, the emergence of the Christian church. Where did the church come from? There is this historical entity known as the Christian church. Where did it come from? Many historians have said that you have to have some explanation as to how this body, how this institution emerged out of nowhere. And of course, the clear presentation was it was the resurrection. People began believing in the truth of the resurrection, and it produced historic Christianity. The church emerged out of the apostles' testimony to encountering the resurrected Christ. And we can build point 6 on that, Joe. The change in the day of worship from the Sabbath day. The Sabbath would be sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, the 7th day of the week. Christians began meeting on the first day of the week. Why would they do that? They were Jews. They were connected to Judaism. The only explanation for why Sunday began to have significance is that Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week on Sunday. And so Christianity begins... Its doctrinal and cultural institutions are changed by its reflection upon the resurrection. These are the 6 evidences chain of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, this is a question really that would apply in another context, but for those who would be critical of the church's changing of that date, you're saying that this was such a huge transformation that even approaching the Ten Commandments and tweaking it, if you will, was called for in this instance, because we're talking about the resurrection.
And why, I mean, why would Sunday have any significance whatsoever? But it's because of the resurrection. It begins to be called the Lord's Day. And of course, there is the discussion about how Jesus, he fulfills our Sabbath rest for us because of his life, death, and resurrection. But it indicates very powerfully the significance of the first day and Jesus' resurrection.
Great. Okay, so those are the 6 lines of evidence for the resurrection. That concludes this podcast. And Ken, what are you going to talk about next time?
Well, we're going to begin looking at this question of if you have an explanatory theory, for example, the naturalists say maybe there are some natural explanations. We're going to look at what is a good criteria for judging whether you have a good explanation for this. Do the Christians have the best explanation, or is there some alternative? Well, what criteria will help us to sort all that out? We'll look at that next time.
Okay, thank you. Ken, can you recommend a couple of resources? Of course, we want to mention your book, without a doubt. You have a chapter on the resurrection there, but I know you come armed with other resources as well.
I do, and I have, Joe. It really is important that Christians study the case for the resurrection. And in fact, that's the book I'd like to recommend. It's called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus by the distinguished apologist Gary Habermas and his associate Michael Licona. This book looks at the evidences for the resurrection, the explanations. It does a great job of presenting it in a popular form so that this could be a great study tool that could be used at church. And, you know, Christians need to feed their faith. If people have doubts from time to time and struggle with uncertainties, one of the causes may be that they're not continually looking and studying and reviewing this powerful material to support the resurrection.
Okay, thank you for that, Ken. Ken Samples. Good day, Ken.
Hello there, Joe.
Ken, we've been on this, for me at least, exciting series on the resurrection. I trust it is for listeners as well, with the thought that this is a doctrine that Christians can really understand and hopefully get some bolstering in case they run into skeptical inquiry on this. We're going to talk about an aspect of this series today, which is what, Ken?
Well, I want to touch on, first of all, how do we properly reason when it comes to developing a theory or a hypothesis. The Christian interpretation is the best explanation concerning all of these events is that Jesus rose from the dead. A little later in the series, we'll talk about some alternative naturalistic theories, but what's a good criteria for us to follow? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call abductive reasoning, and then we'll look at spelling out that criteria.
We'll delve into that in just a couple of minutes, but first we want to mention, as we have the last couple of times, that the Reasons to Believe Scholar Team will be embarking on a great cruise, Ken, August 8th through the 15th. You're going to be part of that. It's through the Inside Passage of Alaska. And, you know, I had to kind of think about this a little bit because Alaska has a panhandle. We tend to forget that. So it kind of comes down the coast of Canada. And I guess this is the area we're talking about. There are lots of islands there.
Yes.
So this is where this boat is going to cruise through. So you're going to see all these wonderful glaciers. And
I am. Boy, I'll tell you, I don't know who's more excited, my wife or myself. It's going to be a great time.
A good time with the Scholar Team. You'll be able to rub elbows with them. It's called the 7 Days of Creation, I believe. Is that correct, Ken?
That's right. We're going to look at the 7 days of creation, compare them to what we know about science,